Today, we're talking about Botswana, and there's something so hectic that has happened in Botswana because Botswana have said they're tired of BDP for the first time in how many years? 60 something years, 66 or something years, the BDP has lost. So here's the headline for what's happening in Botswana right now. The party that has governed Botswana since it became independent in 1966 received a stunning rebuke in the national elections, losing its majority in parliament for the first time. The results which have been coming out have indicated that the main opposition party, the Umbrella for Democratic Change, is already past the point that they needed to be to become the majority. There are 61 seats available at the time that we're recording this. They're about on 36 seats. It's a first past the post system, parliamentary system. Members of parliament elect the president. But this result basically means that the current president, Masisi of the former governing BDP, the Botswana Democratic Party, will not receive a second term. It's done. It's dust. It's crickets. He has conceded the race at a news conference on Friday, and he said that he would ensure a smooth transition to power to the opposition leader, who is now the president-elect, Tumo, and he will be the next president of Botswana, a landlocked nation of 2.5 million people in Southern Africa. So just to bring you into context, if you haven't been following, the main players in the election I've already mentioned: the BDP, which is the party which was governing since 1966. Then you have the UDC, which is this umbrella movement for democracy, which was made up of the Botswana Movement for Democracy and also the Botswana People's Party, the BPP. So it was made up of the BMD and the BPP. And then there's another political party, not part of the UDC, which is the BNF, the Botswana National Front. It's the oldest political party in Botswana. They're not really doing well in this oldest opposition party in Botswana. They're not doing well in this election. You've got the BPF, which is the Botswana Patriotic Front, which is the party that was formed by Ian Khama. And it's a party basically that was formed in 2019 as a result of the rivalry between former President Ian Khama and Mokgweetsi Masisi. Right. So then you've got that entity. Then you've got the BCP, which is the Botswana Congress Party, which was founded by Dumelang Selashando's father, whose name I can't remember right now. But in 2008, it was a breakaway from the BNF. So that's the political environment. I just have to admit, one of our other co-hosts, I'm here today, not by myself. I'm here with Kgosi, Chief Moremong, who's going to be giving us some commentary from the ground. We're also being joined right now by Tumo Moremedi, who is also going to be giving us some commentary, some reflection on his perspective. But before I go to them, let me just give you some information about the president-elect. The president-elect is Duma Gideon Mboko. He's the president-elect of Botswana, leader of the opposition in the National Assembly from 2014-2019. He's a lawyer, he's a jurist, and he is the person basically who is credited for the creation of the Umbrella for Democratic Change, this alliance, which is now the governing alliance. And his background is that he studied law at the University of Botswana. He was elected to the Student Representative Council whilst he was at UB. Amongst his classmates were the High Court judges, Michael Leburu, Ki Tigane, and Benga Meseshele, and Lot Moroka. And after graduating in 1993, he attended Harvard Law School, where he obtained a master's law degree. So welcome to you, Tumo. Also, just giving people an understanding of just some of the background information. But I want to go to you guys. I'll start with Chief, and then I'll come to you, Tumo. And the first question here is, what are the big issues going into this election? Now that we've given the audience some understanding, what are the big issues going into this election from your perspective? Chief, over to you first, and then we'll go to Fangs.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jamie, and thank you for having me on your wonderful show, The Dissection. I'm a huge fan. I love it.
Thanks, brother.
I'm talking to you live from Gaborone, Botswana, where we have just witnessed history. this is a first for the majority of Botswana to see a transition of power. We've all grown up under this BDP rulership. So we don't know any other government but the BDP. It's foreign to us right now what's happening. Even the idea that there'll be a new president next week, it's a completely amazing thing, you know? So, ultimately, I think what was the big issues or the reason why they lost, there was a number of things, right? And I'll just quickly break it down into three main ideas. The first was the war with the former president that the current president, or who is also now the former president, was having, right? Secondly, was the downturn in the economy, which severely impacted your everyday Botswana. And thirdly, it was about the personal attributes of the president himself, which I don't think resonated with a lot of Botswana, or rather, a lot of Botswana just didn't like a lot of these personal attributes, which at the end of the day, we know that this is it's a popularity contest. So I think he failed on that regard, which is something that Duma Boko managed to do very well after failing in 2019. So quickly, very firstly, right, the war with the former president, I think hugely defines President Masisi's legacy, because he was the first president in our country's history to not have that smooth handover of power. Remember, the handover happened within party. So now this sort of took up a lot of his time, because now he was worried about, I mean, not say worried, I don't know if he was worried, but he was occupied with dealing with a lot of issues surrounding the former president. This is why the former president even went into exile. And then a lot of questions kept coming from international media and stuff. So I think this created a huge distraction, and it also prevented a lot of trust from people within his circle, because now you're either for him or for the former president. So I think this created a problem on its own. It occupied a lot of his time. Secondly, the downturn in the economy was a huge thing, right? Right now, I mean, when Botswana, historically, it's a diamond producing country, and we've always had a relatively good GDP. But right now, I think we are in the top 4 worst performing economies in Africa. Our foreign investment account in the past, I think 3-4 years, went from being about 18 billion to now it's standing at about 2 billion. So there's a lot of what is seeming like misuse and misprioritization of funds when people, your everyday person, is suffering. A very quick example, the president led this whole initiative to go and import some special breed cattle from Texas. He brought them over on a plane and everything. Yeah, and it's a whole thing. I advise you to just read up a little bit about it. Botswana made jokes about it, or, now we have cattle flying in on planes and stuff. But it wasn't funny now when you're contrasting it with the situation where there's literally schools that don't have classrooms. And in 2024, there are Botswana students from a diamond-producing nation who are learning under trees outside. People wouldn't believe that these are the things that are happening, but it even goes as far as even to like the health ministry. There's a shortage of basic medicines in hospitals, things like paracetamols and stuff. So I think this pinch on the everyday man really put pressure on people to change their minds. Thirdly and lastly, there's a lot of personal attributes that people didn't really like about the president. And obviously this I can just gauge from social media and things like that. Yeah. There was this narrative that was being built that our president wasn't the most honest person, and he had a tendency to flip-flop on issues and just, say one thing today and tomorrow say something completely different. It was even highlighted in the presidential debate by the leader of the BCP, Dumelang Saleshando, where he made a joke about it and said, he's never seen someone with such a talent like President Masisi. He can lie to you straight in your face and then act like nothing has happened. And I think this is a narrative that a lot of Botswana have had, because there's been numerous occasions where he said something on record. And now we're living in the social media era where somebody is just going to take your clip and put it right next to the clip of you denying what you said. and then you really are not answerable. Yeah, no, if you know about us as a people, as Botswana, we are very humble people, down to earth people. Botho is one of our very big
Mm.
values, which you guys what you'd call a
Ubuntu.
yeah, yeah,
Ubuntu.
yeah, right. So things like lying, maka, hubua maka, as we call it in Setswana,
Mm.
it's like something that's very, very heavily frowned on. So I think ultimately these three things, plus a number of other things, were the undoing of President Masisi.
All right, all right. Thanks for that. So let's go to you, Tumo, and hear what you think about the issues that really drove Botswana to say that they're done. Kimaka fela, or was it more?
No, like I think Chief's analysis was actually really on point. I think the only things I'd want to add to that is, well, firstly, it's like you said, it's the economy, stupid, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that our economy is performing worse right now, or as badly as it's ever done since we discovered diamonds, right? Which should give you, that's 40 years plus years. We've
Mm.
never in our lifetime seen the economy this bad, growth rate this bad, what 1% growth rate, our GDP, right? Which we've never seen before. We had the fastest growing GDP in the world for 40 years, for most of
Mm.
my life, right? So this is a complete shock to us, right? I think even socially, just to speak on Chief's point, pick up on Chief's
Mm.
point about how have personality issues, right? I think socially, from my own just gauging social media and talking to people and stuff, I've never seen Botswana's society this pessimistic about the future before. And
Mm.
like when you check out international happiness indexes and stuff,
Mm.
Botswana was ranking. Oh, these are things that we've never, this is not how you would characterize our society when we were growing up throughout the 90s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, so on, right? So this is new to us. And I think Botswana at some point had gotten to, yeah, they gotten to a point where we need to do something to change because we don't see a positive outlook. So that's the first, right? The economy and just social outlook. But I want to talk about like the way this president
Mm.
came into power as well. Because I think it's a big thing, the contrast, right? The contrast
Yeah.
from how things used to be, the way things are now. The contrast between the way he kind of was perceived when he came into power
Mm.
and the reality or what people perceive to be the reality, right?
Mm.
So he came in on an anti corruption ticket. He
Mm.
came in on talking about judicial independence, right? And one of the big moves that he did in the first couple of months of him taking power, becoming president. And remember, in Botswana, the way that our presidents have gone into power since independence is not elections, right?
Mm.
The sitting president will step down in the middle of their term, which means then the vice president becomes the president, and
Yeah.
they've got 2 years as the incumbent before they get to elections, which gives
Yeah.
them a huge advantage, obviously. So that happened this time round. And one of the first moves he did was he fired the head of the DIS, which is the local intelligence agency
Mm.
that was set up by his predecessor. Right
Yeah.
now, that was a very controversial agency already. It was quite divisive within our society. So when he came in and said, "Well, you know what? We're all about justice and about due process and all of that. And we don't believe in extrajudicial killings, which the intelligence agency had been accused of."
Mm.
So then when he came in and fired the head of that organization, then Botswana just felt, oh, wow, this guy's serious about change,
Yeah.
right? But then once he won the elections the year afterwards, no actual change happened in the way the DIS
Mm.
ran. So that guy who was the head of the DIS, he was like a pariah. Essentially, he was prosecuted, all of
Yeah.
that. But the actual institution did not change, right? So
Mm.
the core issues that Botswana had with it were problematic. And then you started getting issues like over the past year and a half, 2 years, he's had dispute with one of the chief, right, or queen, whichever term you prefer to use, right, of one of the largest tribes in Botswana. And so that chief, the government wanted to appropriate some land, tribal land from the Balete tribe, right? And
Mm.
she's the chief of that tribe. And she didn't want to allow that to happen. She believed it belonged to her. well. So long story short, that went to court, right? And she accused the president of influencing the judicial system, to the point where she said that she was taken to the president's house in black SUVs in the middle of the night, and the president told her, former president now, told her essentially that the judges do what I tell them to do, so you just need to fall in line, something to the effect of that, right? So now this is the person that came in on an due process justice ticket. We're going to allow the court. So, of course, whether or not it's true, and we don't know, right? This is he said, she said type stuff. But the point is what Botswana are hearing, right? And it makes a marked contrast from the image that he had portrayed. And the second one that I want to show contrast there was in terms of corruption. Right. He came in on an anti-corruption ticket, and initially there was a huge case when he came into power where the Public Workers Investment Fund, right, was it was pilfered. There was money that apparently went missing. Billions of pula went missing from that account, which is a big deal because this is where all the government workers' retirement funds come from, right? And there was people who were fingered and highlighted that these are the people that are the culprits that are responsible for it. And he came in on the ticket, I'm going to hold them accountable, right? After a year or two of these court cases going back and forth, nothing happened. These guys weren't held accountable. In fact, they ended up getting paid out by the government, right? Now, being paid out by the government because, the case that the government put together wasn't solid and so on. They didn't have the right evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, society is left with this idea that this guy came in as corruption. He made this big deal about taking down people and charging them for corruption and so on. And then at the end of it, we end up paying those supposed corrupt people. Whether or not they're corrupt, the point is, or if it's true, the point is this is the perception that ended up being, that pervasive perception of the president at the end of it. So it's what Chief was saying, the idea of him coming across as untruthful, right? When you look at some of the big things that he stood for when he came into power, they all ended up looking like big defeats. So it was like a different PR win for him, right?
No, thank you. That's very instructive. And you guys have covered a lot of the questions I was going to ask. But I do want to ask a question about the vote counting, because I saw that there was some controversy, and Botswana seems like you defended the election. I saw that there were some issues. People were saying that the DIS was moving with ballot boxes that they were not supposed to move with. And for everyone else, that's the secret police in Botswana. And it seems as if voters were at voting stations with their flashlights, their phones, their cars. What has this moment been like watching the election unfold? Because, in Southern Africa, there are two countries where once they recognize that they're losing, they start doing funny business. Frelimo in Mozambique does the funny stuff. ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe does funny stuff. But it looks as if Botswana because there were issues, I think, even in 2019. But now it looks as if you guys came through and defended this election. Tell me, just from your guys' perspective, what is happening. We'll go to you first, Kgosi, and then we'll come back to you, Tumo. How did you feel, and what was going on the ground?
Yeah, speaking of neighboring countries that we shall not mention, one of the fears that we had as a society was what was going to happen with these elections, because our Independent Electoral Commission, on the eve of elections, just like a month or so before elections, it was leaked that they went on a benchmarking exercise to go and see how the ZANU-PF electoral machine is run.
And that's the worst announcement.
It raised a lot of flags, especially because it came as a leak. So it raised a lot of flags that people were just like, no. So I think also, look, let's give President Masisi his credit where it's due, because I think one thing that we ushered in his administration is more political education. People are woke this time around. People understand exactly how the voting works, and they were not about to be hoodwinked, especially because in 2019, there was widespread allegations of rigging. So now, people were just like, okay, I wish these guys are going to rig. And on top of the fact that they've just been in bed with ZANU PF and the close relationship between our president and Mr. Mnangagwa that side, then everybody was just like, we are not about to let this go down in that direction. But the one thing I must say about my people, we are a very peaceful people. There's a saying in Setswana that says, which means that the biggest fight that you can have is with your mouth. So I didn't really anticipate any bloodshed or anything like that. Even the police, I didn't anticipate that they were going to be overzealous with their force because, like I said, we were not those kind of people. It wasn't about to descend into chaos. So yeah, everybody was like making sure they see. I just wanted to add one last thing, that Frank was talking about in terms of rule of law and what made the President Masisi's administration that became a problem for him. It's this famous case that was even spilling over into South Africa involving a DIS agent codenamed Butterfly, where apparently they had said the former president had stolen 100 billion pula. Now,
that's a lot of money.
It became a huge, it's a lot of money. It became a huge thing because at the end of the day, the courts, I mean, first of all, the Bank of Botswana came out and said, look, we've never even had that amount of money, right? But then the courts also came out and said the state fabricated this evidence. The lawyer for that agent at the time, who was a prominent lawyer by the name of Uyapondadi, who coincidentally now was serving on the IEC commission. I had read into that what you want, right? But one thing he made very clear was that it's a sad day for him as a lawyer because he's just found out that the state has fabricated evidence against one of his citizens. Now, this is something that they did not expect to happen in Botswana. No, not only that, right? But it also created an international rift because the case involved prominent people in South Africa, people the likes of Bridget Motsepe, who has now even opened legal proceedings against the people who are trying to defame her for this case. So you see, when you come in on this ticket of rule of law and you promote yourself as this person who loves the law, and then you so publicly fail, it becomes very apparent that you're not really about the rule of law.
Yeah. So before Fang, I'm going to come to you, Tumo. I just want to ask an additional question. Do you guys feel like this election was a rejection of Masisi more than it was an affirmation of Duma Boko, or it was a mix? Go ahead, reflect on Tumo, what you're going to answer anyway, but that's just an additional question, just to keep the conversation going. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. So in terms of how we felt, right, and me observing the elections, like what Chief said, just to add a little bit more, there was, I think because of that revelation about benchmarking with the ZANU PF, as well as our recent history, the opposition parties made a point of educating people what to look out for. They made sure of working closely with the IEC. There was even a couple legal cases with the IEC over the rules governing the elections leading up to election day, right? So everybody, like Chief says, was really vigilant about it. But I also want to take a moment to congratulate like the president and the IEC for the job that they did, because, like what Chief said, you have, as much as, the government is the government and the BDP has its people, ultimately we are a society, right? And within a society, you have many different points of view within the IEC, within every government ministry, government department. You've got people that support different parties, right? So I think what I like to believe is that within that IEC, you've got enough people that want fair elections, because I support BCP, you support UDC, he supports BDP.
Yeah.
We have to at least make sure the right thing comes out. And also, adding on like the concession speech that the president gave this morning, I was really pleased by that. Not that I expected him to do anything crazy, right? We've never had that in our country, but just the way statement that he made, it was a proper congratulation, admission that, you know what, we lost and the elections were fair. I don't want to hear anybody questioning the integrity of these elections. We lost fairly, that sort of thing. So I think ultimately there is still, even whatever you may think about his honesty and, the corruption and so on, there is still a sense of voto in the way that, or at least you want to appeal to have voto in the way that you approach your job, the way that you deal with your fellow citizens and so on. So I think that is something to be remarked on. They could have made things a lot more difficult, but there was enough within them to want to have and to be seen as having fair elections. Now, in terms of how people voted, I 100% agree with what you had asked, which is people weren't necessarily voting for Duma Boko, right? I'm happy to say I voted for his party, and it wasn't because I was voting for him, right? It's more that we needed change, and it could have very well been the other guy that Chief mentioned, Dumelang Saleshando, who between him and Duma Boko, been fighting for the leader of opposition role for about a decade now, right? It could have been him either. I would have been, it could have been anyone else, honestly. I think most of us feel as long as it was changed, because elections don't work as a check and balance if nobody ever loses, right? If the ruling party never loses, then how are they holding them accountable? So I think a lot of us at some point just got to like, look, let's change and see what happens. And I've been seeing it on social media, people posting, it's okay, we're giving them just 5 years. And if they mess about, we're going to take them out too, right? So I think it's this new idea that, look, we just need to make these guys feel that we are going to hold them accountable.
Yes. So now here's my next question. We've seen the emergence of this political party here, the Botswana Patriotic Front, and they seem to be, I think they're now on 6 seats or something like that. And it's this party that was formed by Ian Khama as part of his, annoyance and disgruntlement with the way things went down with Masisi. They're getting some seats. Some people are saying they're too tribalistic, they're too focused on issues of their tribe. But I'm wondering, what do you think the future is of political parties like the BNF and the BPF in the future of, and actually, let me just say even BCP, because, Dumelang Salashando is also sitting on a significant number of seats as opposed to BNF, which is almost nowhere. So where do you think these parties are going to be going into this new dispensation? This dispensation where now they are opposition to their own opposition, which they used to be, working together with against the BDP. Chief, let's go first. We'll go in that order.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because like you correctly highlighted it, they are opposition now to their own former opposition.
Yeah.
And it's interesting with parties like the BPF, which you correctly identified. It was formed as a breakaway group from the Botswana Democratic Party. A large number of its initial members was people who were disgruntled with the Botswana Democratic Party and were on the side of the former president. Now, the former president also happens to be a Kgosi, which is a paramount chief, right? So that now creates a different dynamic, because now he's not just communicating as a politician, he's communicating to his subjects who are bound culturally to go with him, which I think that's the reason why you find that the concentration of the seats for the BPF are in that region where the former president is from. It'll be very interesting what their message now is going to be, because they largely ran a campaign that was around removal of Masisi. So it was only really at the presidential debate where we heard one or two of their ideas, but they weren't as well articulated as the other parties. Really what their main contention was remove Masisi. So to be honest, like to answer your question, is what's going to happen to these parties? They need to find something else to make them relevant
Yeah.
because, like I said, what was their main bone of contention is now gone. So they need to move beyond that, just so that they can see, are they actually offering Botswana an alternative ideology? Are they offering them alternative, policies? Because it does run the risk of running down the lines of being a tribal party, which there was murmurs of that in the past. There's always been this whole north-south divide that politicians have tried to push, right? So I think parties like that, they push the agenda of tribal politics, which is something that I don't really agree with. It's interesting to see now what message that they are going to run with.
All right. Tumo, what do you think about the opposition to the opposition and their future?
Yeah, it's really interesting for me. I think I'm more curious to see how things play out because, on the one hand, like Chief says, the BPF was started as a direct opposition. It's that beef that he was talking about between the former President Khama and now former President Masisi, right? That's what the BPF was founded around, and that's what they have been advocating for the past 5 years. So now that the BDP has lost, and almost certainly, Masisi is going to lose his leadership position within the BDP, right? What does that mean for the BPF? Do they still have a principal opposition to the BDP? I mean, that is, remember, the party that was founded by his father, right?
Do you think he can go back and maybe they do a merger?
Quite possibly. I think that is a real possibility that he could go back. Right. I'm not sure whether he has a dog in this fight anymore, though, considering that it seemed as if his main issue was Masisi. He had a problem with him. He felt this guy was dishonest, duplicitous, etc. Right. So now that he's gone, and also Khama is the primary benefactor for BPF. One, does Khama still have an interest in politics? Right, in being as involved in politics as he's been over the past 5 years, now that his primary enemy's gone? And then two, if he doesn't, what happens to the BPF? Do they even have funding now that they don't have his name backing them? Right. So I'm curious, and I'd like to think that it would be strategically sensible for them to align themselves with the BDP again. Right, because it doesn't seem like they have any principled opposition to them, and it would probably give them the best chance of getting back into power, as in the new BDP or whatever. So I'm interested in that, and I'm also interested to see how the BDP, what they look like as an opposition party, right? Because they've historically had all the funding, right? All the wealthiest people in the country either just donate to BDP or they donate to BDP and another party, but they all donate to BDP, right? So they've got a lot of influence, even though they've lost, almost all their seats. They still have a lot of funding. They still have a lot of allies, very strong allies, right? And in 5 years' time, I'm not sure the opposition parties can rely on we need change anymore, because then the change would mean changing them.
Because you got it.
So I'm wondering.
So if you don't use it, then
exactly. So now I'm wondering, because the BDP almost certainly will stay the wealthiest party over the next 5 years. I'm just wondering how that's going to play out and how the ruling party now, the BMD, is going to negotiate that dynamic. So it's definitely interesting. It's uncharted territory that we're going into right now. I'm just sitting here curious, and as you know, a fan of politics, with my interest in politics, I'm just curious to see how things play out. I'll be watching closely. Yeah.
So Tumo, let me start with you this time. So the election has happened. You guys have identified serious problems. And I think I also saw some problems that were raised about the hospital system, the healthcare system, also on social media, people saying that, there were other, I think I even saw a white man complaining that it's not the way it used to be. And now he has to use private healthcare, etc. And he seemed very heartbroken.
People start complaining, man. When white people start complaining, just know that, yeah.
True. So the question is, what are the challenges facing the country going forward, and how do they get dealt with? Because now diamonds are being made in labs now, right? You got these artificial diamonds.
Yep.
Can Botswana continue to be just a diamond economy? What are you guys thinking about on the ground? I've heard that unemployment has gotten really high. You've spoken about how the reserves have been depleted under Masisi. He's trying to buy these American, cows. All of these things he was doing that were a bit funny. And I saw he also pissed off South Africa because he cut out the South African veggies from being able to come across, because he said that was going to be the economic solution. I'm just wondering, Tumo, we'll start with you. As you are looking forward into future Botswana, what are you seeing? What are you worried about? What are you thinking about as Botswana?
Okay, I'm gonna approach this by firstly looking at. I was giving a prediction to my colleagues this morning, and I said, "You see now, this is similar to the the situation Obama found himself in when he became president, where the economy was tanking, and it was only going to tank for the next couple of years, and you got to make really, really difficult decisions, and everybody's going to point the finger at you for making those difficult decisions, right? And it would be very easy for the former incumbents to point the finger and say, you see, when we were there, you weren't starving like this, right? And now look, things have gotten worse. So I predict that that's what's going to happen, right? Even if we have the best type of governance from the from this coalition, right? I honestly, the UDC, I foresee difficulty because of the things that you stated, right? Diamond sales are stagnating, and not just that, but our relationship with De Beers, which had been, a historic relationship, whatever you say of it, right? Whatever you think of it, it had definitely had a lot of benefit for our country, and now it's really soured, right? During this past 5 years, because of Masisi trying to change the nature of our relationship, right? It's really soured. So now looks like even De Beers is trying to dump shares, right? Such that our diamonds are worth even less. So this is the situation that we're coming into, that this UDC is coming into. So it's with that. So, but there are clear plans that have been in place for a while to try and boost other areas of the economy. Like manufacturing and farming, hence the banning of imports, vegetable imports from outside the country. There's exploitation of stuff like, we're a desert, right? And we've never exploited solar. That's only just started happening now, right? There's the coal fuel reactors that have finally started working properly, and now we have a net surplus of electricity, so we can start exporting. So there are industries that can develop, and there is growth, right? There is potential for growth, rather. The issue is it's not going to be easy, and particularly because, once again, guys were voting, I believe, for the UDC as a rejection of the BDP. And then there's all these really cool taglines that the UDC have, like 4,000 pula minimum wage, just for, so right now minimum wage is 100 pula, right? Which is ridiculous. So stuff like that, right? I don't think they're going to be able to implement that from the start, right? Not in the first 5 years. I don't think it's realistic looking at the way our economy is, right? So stuff like that might make it difficult for the UDC to implement a vision, because I don't think 5 years is quick enough, is long enough, right? So that's the issue. Is it's going to be a lot of difficult decisions coming from the UDC, and it's going to be a lot of difficult times for us living here. But hopefully, because like Chief said, we have been learning a lot more about politics and the way our country runs, because we've all been trying to understand why our lives are getting worse. So hopefully Botswana understand that we are in for a difficult road, but the best way out is through, That's kind of how I see it. So it'll be difficult. Yeah.
All right. And Kgosi, what do you think?
Look, like Frank said, I think it's going to be difficult to implement a few of those economy stimulating measures just due to the way right now, right? But I think one of the most important things, and this is something that His Excellency Duma Boko, now we should get used to calling him His Excellency.
As a side note, I don't
debate,
like calling these African guys excellent. I mean, it frustrates me that they got this.
Let's give them a chance to be excellent first. Let's allow them to be excellent, right? So I'll give him the clean slate. I'll call him His Excellency. Look, one thing he mentioned, right, at the presidential debates was he repeated something that was said by our Minister of Finance, who was appointed by President Masisi. His name is Thapelo Matseka. He came out in the budget speech, I think it was 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, the annual budget speech. And he said 37% of Botswana's developmental budget falls through the cracks. Basically, it is misappropriated.
That's a lot.
He was using very nice words just to be like, listen, guys, there's some money here that we just don't know where it's going. That's 37%. A lot. If you had 100 pula right now or 100 rands, and I took 37 rands from you, that's almost it's more than a quarter of what you have, right?
Yeah, I'd be missing a significant part of it.
Exactly. So that's the first thing that H.E. Duma Boko said he wants to do. He wants to plug the gap, because through plugging the gap, then you can deal with addressing some of the shortages in other areas, right? And then the second thing, it's just about austerity measures and, reducing this lavish and extravagant spending. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Recently, the president of Namibia passed away. May his soul rest in peace.
Yeah.
Gop. I saw the thread you put out about him, by the way. That was very, very interesting.
Let's leave that one. Let's keep it going.
Yeah. But I do advise your listeners to go read up on that. It's very interesting, right? But, as soon as he passed away, we sent like 100 vehicles to his funeral. And then we also had like a memorial service here. These, I don't know how much it costs, right? But these seem as if unbudgeted for expenses. Yeah. Just thinking off the top of my head. And they seem very expensive because we're not just talking about cars that you and I can drive. We're talking about presidential vehicles, right? And then that's the other thing in terms of austerity and downsizing examples, is that we see how our ministers, and maybe this is a perk of the job, but these guys literally drive top of the range 745s and, all these other cars. Like literally, there's so many luxurious government vehicles, which personally, I don't see the need to have a luxury vehicle for a government official. I mean, obviously, there needs to be some standard because this is somebody that we respect, right? But now when you're talking about cars that are upwards of like 2-3 million pula, and this minister is representing a constituency that doesn't even have running water, it's a huge prioritization of funds. So that's the second thing. Funds just need to be prioritized, and those austerity measures need to be taken. Other things that Fangs mentioned, stimulating the G-spot of the economy, it's going to take a lot of things. Like economists are going to have to put their heads together, because you're right. We can't just be depending on diamonds, right? There's strategies that the government has put out. They have this thing called a MICE strategy, meetings, incentives, conferences, and something else. It also came up in the presidential debate, whether or not it's actually a good strategy, because, Botswana was supposed to host some conference in December about landlocked country, which had been built up as this important conference and why it's important for Botswana to be hosting conferences. But then Duma Boko shut it down, and he's like, look, this thing costs over 1 billion pula to host. And like, really, what does it benefit us,
Yeah.
So I think that's also where a lot of money is going to come from, just cutting expenditure of these, what are seen as luxury or unnecessary expenses.
Well, guys, I mean, I don't want to
add on that, right?
Yeah,
because...
add.
Okay,
Go ahead,
just quickly, like in terms of these conferences, right? Like, it is a real thing, and it's about what the there's this Forbes conference that we've been hosting for the past 2-3 years in Botswana, right? It's supposed used to rotate around the continent, but it's just expensive. So the hosts for the past couple of years are just, no, we're not going to do it, right? But then, yeah, we can have it in Botswana, right? And it's supposed to be stimulating like youth businesses and the arts and so on. We work in youth business and arts areas, me and Chief.
Yeah.
Right. And we've seen zero stimulation, right? So it's that sort of thing. Steve Harvey getting given $500 million pula to start a TV show that he then shot in South Africa. You know what I mean?
For real.
So it's stuff like that where it comes. Yeah, for real. That Family Feud thing. He came to Botswana, he was going to do it, and then he went to South Africa and thought, yeah, South Africa is a better market. I'm going to do it here.
But he took the money still.
Yeah.
That's crazy, bro. Well, okay. I got you. I understand. Gents, I think, this year, Botswana has really shocked the world. First with Teboho Letsile right there, sprinting towards that 200 meters, winning, athlete of the year, I think is whatever award he won just now. So I think that he was giving the warning shots that there's a new season of Botswana coming, a new season of Pula coming.
I think it was Cat Williams, man. He opened the vortex for 2024.
He did, and he needs to go back to Shine and Shap and close it soon. It's been too much. Maybe after the American elections, he needs to go shut that vortex, and then we can just take some time to breathe. But thanks so much, guys, for coming through. I think Botswana has really done something significant here because you've also shown that these dominant party states are not forever. And for a long time, the BDP was a good option of leadership. And you guys have shown that your democracy was resilient enough that even within 2 elections, you could make that move, because for a very long time, there was never any question about, is the BDP a strong political party for you guys? Seretse Khama, Ian Khama were praised for good leadership. But when we got into this Masisi era, you guys were able to then say, no, we're not good with bad leadership, broken promises, looted money, chaotic governance. And there's examples there for Eswatini, there's examples for Mozambique, there's examples for Zimbabwe, and even for South Africa to think about how do we transition, if ever, away from the ANC in totality, because the ANC is still governing South Africa. Many things that we couldn't touch on, like the strategy taken by the UDC to actually come together as opposition parties, offer a unified umbrella, be able to navigate all of the egos internally in all of that. So thanks for giving me some time on a Friday.
On that very quickly?
Yeah, go for it.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Look, I think also, like you just mentioned something very, very important here about how the UDC managed to convince Botswana that they were the party of choice, right?
Yeah.
And it's because I believe it's because they managed to have the most consistent message and they have the largest reach. They're not just seen, like we mentioned earlier, as a tribal faction. The one red flag, Jamie, that does come about when you're dealing with this umbrella is the fact that they still have not managed to accommodate all of the egos of the men at the top of these opposition parties, right? Dumelang Salishando and H.E. Dumaboko have in 2019 were part of a faction, but then they had a historic fallout, and now these are 2 men who Botswana see as possible president and vice president. So I think over the next 5 years, this is something also that we are going to be watching very closely.
Yeah.
Because we are wondering, what is it that is stopping these 2 potentially great statesmen from being able to work together?
Yeah. So no, I think you're raising a big important point that we're all going to have to watch and see how they navigate those dynamics going forward. But today is just a day of celebration, day of victory. Congratulations, Botswana. Thanks so much for helping me break it down to the audience. And hopefully I can have you guys on in future. But thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. And I just want to say shout out to Litsile Tebogo, man. He won Athlete of the Year. Yes. Unfortunately, his thing was announced the same time as we were waiting for the elections. But that's our boy, man. When he comes back, we'll welcome him. The new president will welcome him. Hopefully, we'll get another holiday. Yeah, you need another holiday because he definitely deserved it. I, for one, was very happy because Noah Lyles gets on my nerves. I can't stand that guy. We do have a new king of sprinting, and it's Letsile. Yeah. Okay, guys. Cheers. Thanks so much. Yeah. Sure, Jamie. Take it easy. Brother.